Hello, everyone. I am Sophia Melonē, the Debt Demolisher, here to bring you the tools, tips, and tricks to help you manage your financial baggage the right way. I'm excited to be before you all this evening for our Saturday night student loan chat all around forgiveness. And hopefully you guys have been taking some action towards the public service loan forgiveness limited waiver that's set to expire this coming Monday. One of the things that I promised was that I was going to continue to come forth, not only speaking before you all, but answering any questions that you may have to help get you one step closer to getting your forms in prior to the deadline. As you join us out of the room, feel free to ask any questions that you may have. Also, feel free to share this out with other folks who may have federal student loans or who may work in public service or who may have questions around the process in general and what they may need to do and what they possibly can do prior to Monday. I know we're winding down. We're very close to the deadline, but it doesn't mean that you can't take action. I've been seeing some folks that have been posing some questions on some of my prior videos. So I appreciate you all going back and watching those and taking some action related to that area. But also just making sure that you do all that you can to take action by Monday. The limited waiver for the public service loan forgiveness is set to expire October 31st. And so by that point, you would have had to at least consolidated your loans, meaning submitted a loan consolidation application if you need to by October 31st. And you also would have to have a PSLF form, at least one PSLF form on file or filed or sent in by October 31st. In order to take advantage of the limited waiver perks, which will include a series of things to help you get closer to public service loan forgiveness by allowing some of those counts that might not have counted under regular and normal PSLF rules to be able to count now, which could get you closer to loan forgiveness. So feel free to share this out with others, ask your questions if you have any pertaining to the forgiveness, pertaining to the limited waiver, pertaining to what you need to do by Monday. I have been sharing with folks that it's important that you make sure that you have your information postmarked, whether it be you send it via mail, you send it via delivery tracking, you have at least your forms printed, downloaded, generated in the system, and most importantly, getting them signed by your employer so that you can get them sent in today. Not today, but by Monday. So we are really pressed for time. If you are in a situation where you have employers who need to get back to you, I did get a text from one of my friends. I was like, oh my gosh, I got all my forms back from my employers. I'm going to send it in. That's the kind of stuff that I want to be able to hear. And this particular person took action literally this past week. But luckily for her, she was able to get all of the signatures that she needed from all of her prior employers. So I don't want you to think that I missed out on my time, or I don't want you to think that there's nothing really else that I can do at this point. Don't give up. As long as you've gotten one form in, at least you know that you can take the initiatives to get the rest in at a later time. So we have a question that says, so are they going to mail us a check? So I'm assuming that this question is pertaining to the one-time debt relief and the forgiveness around that. So I'm glad that you asked this question, because I think some people are stating that checks are going to start going out for the one-time debt relief. That's not how it's going to work. So the only instance in which you would get a check back from the one-time debt relief, and this is not PSLF, this is this is for the one-time debt relief, which is $20K or $10K. Once the process continues and they're able to grant the discharge and so forth, if you are someone who was making payments, meaning voluntary payments during the repayment pause. So if all of this time since the pandemic started, if you had federal loans, you did not have to make payments on your student loans, because all student loans, federal student loans that are managed by the Department of Education, was placed on repayment pause. but some people were still making payments during this voluntary repayment pause. So what they said is that if you were making voluntary payments during this time and the one-time debt relief gets applied, and so they discharge whatever amount they need to discharge, then you could possibly get a check back for what you paid during the voluntary period up to the amount of your relief. So let me give you an example. Let's say, for example, you have $10,000. You're eligible to receive $10,000 because you were not a Pell Grant recipient. Because you were not a Pell Grant recipient, but you do meet the income criteria, you're eligible to receive $10,000 of student loan debt relief. But after going through your balances or going through your accounts, you only now have an outstanding balance of $9,500, hypothetically. So you have a balance of $9,500 and they apply the relief to clear your balance of $9,500. If, for example, you had made payments during the repayment pause, and let's say you made volunteer payments on your student loans for $100 or $200 or $300. We'll just say, let's say it added up to $300 of voluntary payments that you've made. What's going to happen is you will get a check for the $300 that you've made because only $9,500 of your relief was utilized. So they are going to be issuing refunds or essentially checks for whatever difference between the debt relief that you received that's applied to your actual loans to clear your balance up to whatever the amount you were eligible for, whether it's $10K or if it's $20K, but only to the extent of how much you paid in excess during that voluntary period. Does that make sense? So make sure when you're hearing stuff and when you're seeing stuff that you read the fine print, that you go to the source, that you read what the site is saying, because sometimes this is how misinformation gets kind of spread. But they've clearly stated that when it comes to any potential refunds related to the one-time debt relief, it's only to the extent of not only how much you've paid voluntarily during the repayment pause, but also to the extent of what you have left in terms of excess on the one-time debt relief. Hopefully that explained that portion for you guys. What is the December 31st deadline? So the December 31st deadline is when the repayment pause will be lifted. So since COVID started, or I want to say March 13th, 2020, is when the initial repayment pause went into play, where the Department of Education had set all federal loans that were managed by them. They had set the interest rate to 0, and they also made the payment requirement 0. So during that period, people did not have to make payments on their federal student loans that was managed by the Department of Education, nor are they accruing any interest on those loans during this repayment period time. On August the 24th, the Biden administration announced the debt relief plan, which was a 3-part plan intended to help with easing the burden of getting through this COVID-19 season. So first part of the plan was to extend the repayment pause, because the repayment pause was supposed to expire August 31st, 2022. But on the 24th of August, they extended it to allow the repayment pause to last until December 31st, 2022. So those who have loans that were in the repayment pause, they still are in the repayment pause until the ending of this year. And then the repayment pause will lift in the beginning of 2023, which means federal loan borrowers will have to begin repaying on their loans. The second piece of that is the forgiveness, which is the 10K or the 20K, which I just talked about. And then the third part of the plan is the new IDR plan that they are planning to introduce, to allow your payments to be no more than 5% of your discretionary income. This piece is still in the works. This piece has not been finalized, but more regulation and more rules will be coming out related to that in the future once it gets through its comment period and whatever regulatory change it needs to go through in order to be approved. So the first part of the relief plan is already set in stone, which is the extended repayment pause. The second part of the debt relief plan, which is the one-time debt relief, the forgiveness of $10K or $20K. The applications are available for people to apply. They just can't process it at this time until things are settled with the courts. And then they're introducing that piece of people being able to get some of their money back if they paid during the repayment pause voluntarily. So that's one piece. And then the third piece, which is the IDR, which we just talked about. So that's the deadline for that. The other December 31st deadline is for applications for the one-time debt relief, but that's December 31st, 2023. So for the one-time debt relief, 10K or the 20K, that application is available. Anyone can apply, and they'll let you know whether or not if you are approved or not for it. And then whenever they're able to do the discharge, they will. But if you, what was the point that I was trying to make there? I literally just lost my train of thought. Oh, the application. So you have until December 31st, 2023 to submit an application for a one-time debt relief. So that's what those two deadlines are for. One is for the payment pause being lifted, which will be December 31st, the ending of this year. And then the other one is the deadline for you to submit an application for the one-time debt relief, which is December 31st, 2023. Son received an update on his PSLF. Said notification will be sent in 6 to 10 days. Issue is this. On Mohila, still states employer verification needed. Faxed and uploaded 3 times. Anxious to get the notification to see what's going on. Just stay optimistic. Just stay optimistic. Cannot get through to speak to a rep at Mohila. It's okay. Just be patient. Be patient. If you need to make more phone calls, if you want to call them again, by all means, try to do that. Said notification will be received in 6 to 10 days. Well, hopefully you'll get an update or a notification. So hopefully that's a good sign. Don't be anxious. Don't be anxious. I have a federal loan that made me pay during the freeze. Would that be included in the payback? So if you had a federal loan that made you pay during the freeze, then more than likely that loan was commercially held. So and remember, they changed the rules around the one-time debt relief. So with the one-time debt relief, if your loans are commercially held, then unfortunately you won't be able to receive the relief unless you consolidate it prior to that cutoff, which was September 28th. I think was the last day you could have consolidated from a commercially held FFEL loan or Perkins loan into a direct consolidation loan. Then you should be able to get it. But if you did not do any consolidation, you're still with your commercially held loan servicer, or not even loan servicer because they're commercially held at this point, then unfortunately you would not receive the relief. And in that case, then you would not get any payback. You would not get any payback. Yep. Will 3/20/20 through 12/20/22 33 months count towards the 120 automatically if we qualify? Yes, it will. Yes, it will. They did indicate that all periods under the repayment pause will count for you just as long as you were working with the qualified employer during that time. So yes, so as long as you were working with the qualified employer from March 2020 up until December 2022, then yes, those periods will count towards PSLF. Hi, I just got here. I'm hearing, is it true Biden will be mailing checks out to us? I just spoke about that. Is the waiver application different than PSLF? So the waiver is not necessarily a separate application. The PSLF form is what you need to submit, but you just have to get it in within the waiver period. So the waiver period expires on October 31st, 2022, but it's the same form if you've already been in PSLF or if you've already been submitting your employer certification forms. It's the same form. You already have one on file, more than likely, if you've already been doing it. But if you need to kind of get your employer counts, your employer periods updated, then I would definitely submit a form just to make sure that all periods will be able to be covered. Will there a year from another cut towards student loan? Can you retype your question? I'm not understanding what you're asking. If you could retype that question. Are they really sending checks? I just answered that. Do you think the payment pause will extend past 2022? That's a great question. I'm just going to say what I think, and I can't speak to say that this is what's going to be or not. But they said that this one up until December 31st is going to be it. And I believe the reason why they said it's going to be it because of the one-time debt relief that would help so many people with easing the burden of them getting back into repayment come the new year. But if there are going to be challenges and holdups potentially in getting the relief out, we don't know how long it's going to take for a final decision to be made or for it to be overturned, and the Department of Education will be able to proceed with processing the one-time debt relief applications, but we don't know. But I would think, and I'm just saying from me, not from anybody else's, there could be a possibility that they could extend it if, stuff keeps getting pushed back. But we don't know. I'm just saying from what I think. But from what they said that December 31st is going to be the last repayment pause, and because they're going to roll back into repayment status come the new year. But I don't know if that's going to change because that extended plan was a part of their 3-part plan, if that makes sense. So the extended repayment pause is a part of the 3-part plan. And with the debt relief being a part of the 3-part plan, it seems like they were kind of trying to work that in tandem so that at least a bulk of the applications could be processed prior to the new year, which would cause people to basically either have no student loans to pay on in the new year or have a drastically reduced amount of loans to pay off in the new year once it enters repayment status. I filled out my application, but I saw a notification that the courts blocked it for now. That is true. It's temporarily on hold. So as long as you got your application in, you will be fine. Sophia, I am trying to be patient. Grrr, I know. Please be patient. Please be patient. Trust that it's all going to work out in your favor. Please trust that it's going to work out all in your favor. Amen. Is the wave. Okay, I just answered that. Thank you so much for the follows and the shares, you guys. Feel free to continue to like and share as you come in the room. I got an email from the Department of Education regarding the debt discharge my service. Debt discharge my service still hasn't gone through. Or are you talking about borrower's defense discharge? Like, which discharge are you talking about? Is the public service application the same as the debt relief? No, it's not the same. So the PSLF application is completely different from the one-time debt relief. The one-time debt relief application is very short. It takes you less than 5 minutes to do. You're essentially self-certifying when you go through the one-time debt relief application because you're just putting in your name, your social security number, your date of birth, your email address, your phone number, and then you're certifying to one of the statements that's true based on your tax filing status and based on your adjusted gross income for 2020 or 2021. The public service loan forgiveness application is something that's completely different, and it does require not only completion of forms by you, but also signatures of your employment sections by your job, by someone who is authorized to sign to verify your employment. So that can take a little bit more time and a little bit more coordination to get them signed, because you have to now get your employer to sign off on it in order for you to be able to submit it. So it is a different form. So if you're thinking about PSLF, then you want to go to studentaid.gov/PSLF, as in Public Service Loan Forgiveness, PSLF, and then it'll take you to that site and you can use the help tool to fill out your application. For the one-time debt relief, as soon as you go to studentaid.gov, it's going to be the first thing that you see, and it'll take you right to the button to apply for the one-time debt relief. So if you have commercial loan that you pay separately, you can't qualify for the one-time debt relief, right? Because they've changed it. So if you have commercially held loans, then unfortunately, if you have commercially held FFEL loans as is, then you're not going to be able to get the relief because it's commercially held. But if you consolidated prior to September 29th, so meaning if you consolidated September 28th and prior, then you should still be able to receive the one-time debt relief. But if you still have commercially held loans that have not been consolidated, you did not submit an application for consolidation or any of that, then unfortunately you will not be able to receive the relief. Do I have to be working full-time right now to be eligible for PSLF? So my question to you would be, have you ever worked for a qualified employer prior to? Because if you used to work for a qualified employer, but you know that you have been making payments on your loans during that time you were working with a qualified employer, then you definitely want to take advantage of the limited waiver, because with the limited waiver, you don't have to still be working with the qualified employer at the time to receive forgiveness under PSLF. As long as you have direct loans, as long as now under the limited waiver, they are accepting payments under any repayment plan. They're also counting like any long-term forbearance, and this is mainly during the time that you were working with the qualified employer. So this is why it's important for you to identify, number one, if you've worked for a qualified employer from any time between October 1st, 2007 up until now, because that's when PSLF stood up, number one. Number two, they are allowing any payments that you've made towards your student loans to count as long as it's a direct, basically as long as it's under a direct loan, or if it was under one of the loans that could be consolidated to count and roll over. But you definitely want to do this if you're no longer working for a public service loan, if you're no longer working for a public service organization. But if you've never worked for a public service organization and you're wondering, should you apply now, or because you just started working with a public service loan or public service, oh, look at my baby, my niecey just texted me. What I was saying, I'm probably going to get off here because I need to call her. I need to call my niece. But what was I saying? Oh, I was talking about public service loan forgiveness and whether or not if you qualify or not. So you want to first check to see who your employer is. If you don't work for a qualified employer for at least 35, I'm going to say 35, for at least 30 hours a week, then you should at least submit one form if you've already been working for a qualified employer. Is it too late to do the PSLF application? It's not too late to do the PSLF application. Even after this limited waiver expires, if you're eligible for PSLF, if you work for a public service organization, you can still submit your forms even after October 31st. However, what's not going to count for you are all of the perks that's under the limited waiver, because come November 1st, it's going to go back to the normal rules, which will be you would have to be making qualified payments, which means your qualified payments will have to be on a qualified repayment plan. It has to be paid in full. It has to be paid on time, and it has to be under the right repayment plan type. So Either way, I mean, if you work for an eligible employer, it doesn't hurt just to get your forms in. But the limited waiver is really to help those kind of do a catch up and help them get to forgiveness a lot sooner because of how strict the normal PSLF rules are. It can be harder to kind of get it. But they did say this, that in July, I think they said in July 2023 is when they're going to introduce at least some of the perks under the limited waiver. They're going to allow it to go into effect under normal PSLF rules sometime in July of 2023. So that's forthcoming. But for those who are public service workers, you have federal loans, and you know that you used to work for a qualified employer, just do the best that you can to get your forms in during this time. You literally, if you're just starting out, you're literally only going to have half a day Monday, really, because you need to make sure that your forms either get faxed in or that they get postmarked mailed to Mohila, or if you already have an account with Mohila, you can upload it directly, but you're going to have to get your employers to sign off on these forms for you before you send it in. PSLF is Public Service Loan Forgiveness, which is a federal benefit for direct loans, so those who have direct loans. And what it does is it allows you to have your student loans forgiven after 120 qualified payments on that particular direct loan disbursement, however many you have. It scrolled down for me, so I'm trying to go back up. I apologize. What are the checks for? I just explained that. So the checks would be for those who made payments voluntarily during the repayment pause, and they can be issued a refund for what they paid during the voluntary repayment under the voluntary, what they paid voluntarily under the repayment pause, but to the extent of whatever is left within their forgiveness, whether it be 10K, 20K, after whatever monies have been applied to their existing loans. So that's what the checks are for. That's what the checks are for. Let me just make sure. Yeah, so I don't know what the news talking about, some checks and all of that. I just explained to you guys, the only way that you would get something back is if you made voluntary payments during a repayment pause, but to the extent of whatever's left from your relief money, they'll give you that back. That's about it. So yeah, so nobody's getting any actual checks. They're going to apply the money to your balance. That's how that's going to work. Okay, I just want to make sure nothing changed, because I knew from my understanding, I was like, ain't no checks going out. They ain't giving nobody no money. They are not giving nobody no money for no $10,000. No, they're going to apply it to the balance. That's how it's going to work. And then if you made voluntary payments through the repayment pause, then you'll get that back to the extent of whatever you have left in terms of relief money. So I hope y'all caught that. What if you can't find the EIN for the job for the public service loan forgiveness? What do you do? So there's a couple things that you can do. If you have access to your W-2s when you work with that employer, you could definitely try to access those. If you have challenges with trying to locate your W-2s, and if this was depends on who you work for. So it's pretty easy to find like for nonprofits, it's easy to find nonprofits because you can use the IRS's charitable organization or charitable organization search function, which will allow you to just put in that employer's name and you can search them by name and then their EIN will pop up. For government entities, on the other hand, it may be a little bit more difficult to kind of find that on the web or like get confirmation on that or like do a search for it. But I would definitely see if you can reach out to the HR office that you used to work for. Just call your former employer and say, hey, I'm trying to confirm or get your EIN. Can you give it to me so I can fill out my PSLF forms? So that's one thing. I know someone who tried to like look for their employers. I think it was a state government. They were trying to look for the employer's EIN by doing a Google search, but it wasn't the right EIN. So your best bet is going to be to find your W-2s if you can, so that way you can pull it from there, retrieve a copy from there. And if you can't find your W-2s, and I don't know what state that you live in, but most times when you fill out your taxes, they include, and I know this is with some states, I'm not going to say it's for all, but I know with some states, because I'm not familiar with all of the states' tax filings. I just know a few, at least for the people who I work with, where when your tax forms generate, even for the states, it includes like the W-2 portion for it. So it'll say like what your wages are and then the employer, and it'll have the EIN there. So if you can find your former tax records, that may be helpful for you. If you can find your W-2, if you're able to log in, I don't know if you still work for the employer or not, but you can log in and pull down your W-2, or just contact the HR office to have them confirm if you no longer work there. Does working for home health agencies count? So it depends on if that home health agency is a nonprofit organization. And even if it's a nonprofit organization that is not exempt from tax purposes, it could be potentially because of the service that it provides. So one of the checks that you can do for employers, and I did a whole video on this, is actually on my YouTube channel as well. So if you go to Debt Demolisher TV, I did a whole video explaining the employer piece, how to check if your employer qualifies, what to do, how the accounts will work. So you should see that on my YouTube channel. I have a link in my description that'll take you to my YouTube channel as well. But if you look at that and you go through the application that asks you all of the questions, well, if your employer is this, if your employer is that, if your employer is a nonprofit that is not exempt under 501c3, does it provide one of these qualifying services? If your agency or the person you work for or the agency that you work for falls under that, then you should be good. That will count for that should qualify you, because that will be a qualifying employer. But you want to do the test to see. So, because I don't know, which home health agency that you work for and what their status is, whether or not if they're for profit or if they're nonprofit. Because if they're for profit, then unfortunately, that will not work for PSLF. You are the best. Your guidance helped me so much. God bless you. God bless you too, Shawl. God bless you too, Shawl. And I know that's probably not how you pronounce your name, but I'm putting it all together. So, Shawl, I'm sorry. I missed when you spoke about the checks going to us. Can you briefly talk about it? I think I just did it again, so hopefully you were still here when I just explained that piece. But if you didn't, just let me know and I'll quickly repeat it again. My servicer hasn't gotten anything from them. Is that normal? So your servicer, who is your loan servicer now? Who is your loan servicer now? If you know that you submitted your PSLF forms to Mohila, but you have a different loan servicer right now, it could take some time for them to process. So that's probably what it could be. But if you go to mohila.com and click on the PSLF tab and then click on PSLF form status, put in your information, and if Mohila shows you that your forms are processing or whatever, then you know that they got it, and eventually it'll get moved over. I so appreciate your help. I applied for both. Patiently waiting. Amen. I'm so glad to hear that. So glad to hear that. Great job on getting that in. Great job on getting that in. Can you qualify for PSLF if you work? Okay, I think I answered that already. I hope they extend the pause. I would hope they would extend it too. But if things are in line and they're talking about they expect stuff to start being able to be discharged within 2 weeks, then they may not extend it because it's still within that timeline, because applications can still be accepted at this point. And so once they get that green light, I'm telling you, they're going to start cranking out. They're going to start cranking out those monies to be applied to your student loans. And you're going to see some drops in your balances. You're going to get notifications from your loan servicer letting you know that your debt relief got applied. So absolutely. Yes, for 10 years, but not anymore. So, La, I can't pronounce your name. I apologize. But La, if you've been working for a public service entity for 10 years, as long as you know that you were at least in repayment status during those 10 years for your student loans, but you don't work there anymore, man, I would make Monday a priority to begin. Even you don't even have to wait until Monday. Start right now. Go to studentaid.gov/PSLF. Go to the help tool. This is key. Go to the help tool. And when you go to the help tool, it's going to tell you to log in to your FSAID account. Prayerfully, you already have an FSAID account, and prayerfully, you won't have to create one, because if you have to create one, then that may create some delays for you with getting your forms generated through the system. And when I say generated through the system, I mean using the PSLF help tool to input your data so that it can populate the forms for you to download and send to your employer, whether it be you email it to them, however, whatever their process is. I will focus on getting my forms in. I don't know how many employers you have within that 10 years. Hopefully it was just one employer. That will make your life a whole lot easier if it is just one employer. But if it's multiple employers, then you know you're going to have some legwork that you're going to have to do to get your forms generated, downloaded, reach out to your former employer, find out how you can get this thing to them ASAP for them to sign it and get it back to you ASAP if possible. So that way you can get that form sent in, faxed in, mailed in, however you need to get it in. But as long as you make sure that you're keeping record of when you released it, when you sent it, so that, you know, you can confirm that you did this by October 31st. But if I were you, I would definitely take advantage of this, because this is really going to benefit you, because you no longer work for the public service organization. And if you've been in repayment status for all of that time while you were working with that organization, I'm telling you, it's going to be a blessed moment for you. As long as you have direct loans, because that's another thing. I don't know what kind of loans you have. So hopefully you just have direct loans. But if you don't have direct loans, and you can probably still consolidate, but you would have to do all of that by Monday, which would mean submit a consolidation application if you need to. I'm not telling you to. I'm saying if you need to. And get at least one PSLF form signed by an employer and in by October 31st. How will I know PSLF accepted my application? I just shared the status, the status update page from MOHELA, because MOHELA is the loan servicer now for all public service loan forgiveness accounts. They have recently created a status page to help people who have sent in their forms to be able to check the status of their forms that they've sent in. So that's the best way to know. How do you know? So how do you know you have some payments? I'm not sure which question this is pertaining to. So how do you have to have some payments? I'm not sure. I'm not understanding that. Is there a deadline for PSLF for the limited waiver? All of the extra perks, the extra counting, the consolidations that can roll over just for FFEL and Perkins loans, for the counts that you'll be able to get for late payments, short payments, not enough payments, payments not on the right repayment plan. All of those will be able to count for you. That deadline is Monday, October 31st. October 31st is the last day that you can put your name in the hat in order to have the Department of Education or the loan servicers take into consideration essentially any and all payments or any and all payment periods that you've had on your direct loans while you were in repayment status. Just as long as you were working with a qualified employer during that time and you were in repayment status, meaning you were not in school deferment, you can get a whole lot of counts. You can get a whole lot of counts. You're welcome, La. That's great. I submitted my application but wasn't sure. Okay, good. You got it in. Come on, somebody. So glad that you got it in. Does working with... Okay, I just answered that. But you still... I just saw something. It just froze. I hate when that happens. It be scrolling to the bottom on me. But you still have to have paid on your loan for at least 10 years to qualify. Yes, that is correct for PSLF. You have to have the equivalent of 120 qualified payments. Another thing with this limited time waivers is that they are allowing lump sum payments to count as more than one payment. And it's only to the extent of up to a year. So if you made a lump sum payment, let's say that lump sum payment was equivalent to 8 months worth of a student loan payment, but you did it in one month because you made a lump sum payment, then instead of you having one qualifying payment, you will have 8. So that's one of the things. And even in that case, that technically would mean that it will be less than 10 years because of the treatment of the lump sum. So the lump sum payments can be treated as more than one payment, but no more than 12, because they're giving you no more than the equivalent of a year. So depending on what your lump sum payment was divided by whatever your monthly payment amount is, they'll divide that up and then give you that equivalent amount. All right. Good night, Dorothy. Glad that you're here. I went to a school that has lost their accreditation. They were like ITT Tech. Where do I go? So you may want to try borrower's defense. So if you go to studentaid.gov and click on the borrower's defense option, or just type in Google student FSA borrower's defense, make sure that you use a URL that has studentaid.gov on it. Click on it and it'll take you right there. Thank you for keeping us informed. You're so welcome. What if a parent loan is in default? So if you have a parent loan that's in default, then there's 2 ways to look at it. If your parent loan is in default, then you could still get the one-time debt relief, which is the $10K or the $20K, as long as your income qualifies you based on your tax filing status. And for PSLF purposes, if you have any defaulted loans, you cannot qualify for PSLF. The only way to qualify for PSLF is to have loans that are in good standing. And if you have defaulted loans, then you would have to get your loans out of default before you could get any counts or start making progress towards PSLF, because any periods in default will not count, as well as any payments, garnishments, any type of payments that were made during the defaulted period. Even if they were garnishment extractions, they still won't count because your loans are in default. So if you are a Parent Plus holder, loans are in default, one-time debt relief will more than likely be your best bet in terms of what you can get as long as your income qualifies you. I was with Navient. Can I find out who has my loan? Yes, you can. So if you log into your FSA ID account, it will take you to your dashboard, And when you click on your dashboard, you can click on view loan details or view summary, one of the two. One of them is going to say view summary, and then one of them is going to say click on your loan details. When you click on your loan details, it'll tell you who your loan servicer is. So you'll be able to see that by going into your FSA ID account. Thank you for the information. You're very informative on this subject. Thank you so much, Pat. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And my name is Sue. Okay, Sue, I got you, Sue. I got you now, Sue. I got you now, Sue. Shout out to CLW in the room. So good to see you, CLW. Thank you so much for the rose. I've applied for PSLF for multiple loans, but haven't consolidated. Can I consolidate after? So if you want, let me say this. If you want your loans that you've already either made payments on, either could receive credit on because they are direct loans that you already have, then you would want to consolidate by Monday. So as long as you put in an application, a loan consolidation application by Monday, then, and you already have your PSLF forms on file, then you should be good. But they said if you need to consolidate, do your consolidation and then get a PSLF form in for your periods of employment while you were working with a qualified employer. So it depends on what kind of loans you have. I don't know if you have multiple direct loans. I don't know if you have FFEL loans and Perkins loans. And so it just depends on what you have going on inside of your loan portfolio, which I'm not privy to that information, so I wouldn't know. But definitely, if you have any loans that can be consolidated, where you will not lose any prior counts, any prior periods that you've already kind of done or made while working with a qualified employer, then I would definitely take advantage of this limited waiver, because if you apply after October 31st, then essentially that loan count, once it processes, is going to be starting from zero. It's going to be starting from zero. And your goal is to get your loan to as quickly as possible to 120 as you can. So they are allowing loan consolidations during a limited waiver, depending on what you consolidate, because not all loan types can work. It just depends. If you have those loans that can roll over and the counts will work, which will be your FFEL, Perkins, and even any existing direct loans that you have, you can consolidate them into one along with any others if you can afford it. Because again, that's going to be a hefty bill if you have all of these multiple loans that you're now trying to jumble into one, even though you know that you've had periods from those prior loans that will roll over. It'll definitely work to your benefit. But if you'll still have to make some payments before you get to the 120, you definitely want to take that into consideration. But your goal should be to get the 120 on one loan as quickly as possible. And that's the advantage of consolidating if you need to. Thank you so much for sharing out the live. Is there a different payment count for each loan, even if you consolidate it? So that's what I was just talking about. So when you look at PSLF, they're going to be basing it off of the loan. So if you choose not to consolidate and you have multiple direct loans with different repayment start dates, meaning one might have went into repayment status in 2008. Another one might have went into repayment status in 2012. Another one might have went into repayment status in 2016. I'm just saying hypothetically. Each of those direct loans, if you keep it as is, they will have a different PSLF date, because it's essentially by loan and by when it went into repayment status. So if you want to have that happen faster, you can consolidate all of those that have different repayment start dates into one. The oldest one that you have is going to end up rolling over into this new one. So it's going to give you your longest length in terms of qualifying periods and months. And then it'll get you closer to public service loan forgiveness, because you'll get to 120 faster across the board instead of in stagnation, really. So yeah. But it's a different payment count for each loan, even if you consolidate. But if you consolidate, then it's going to take the oldest one. So the count is going to be based on whatever the oldest loan that has qualifying payments on it after you consolidate. As long as it was a direct FFEL or Perkins. So any of the other non-direct loans won't count for that. Once it's consolidated. Just for FFEL, Perkins, and any existing direct loans that you have. Those will roll over. Is consolidation based on 20 or 30 years when going into income driven? It can. It depends on which one you choose. So they have so many different types of repayment plans when it comes to consolidation. You can choose what you want your repayment plan, what repayment plan you want to be on. They have a loan simulator that helps you with making the decision in terms of what to choose, because you do want to look at your affordability when you're consolidating. But if you choose a repayment plan that's 25 years, 30 years, it just depends on which one that you choose, because certain repayment plans give you the years that's allowed. And so you would have to kind of go by that. You would have to go by that. Okay. If I was here, I would go in person if I was her, I would go in person if possible. That's right. You are so right, CLW, because a friend of mine did that same thing. But I had encouraged her as well to call to find out like what their process is, because granted, you can go down there, you can show up, but what if they're not going to sign right that moment? What if they're going to say, okay, yeah, I'll take it. I think in one case, they actually did go down there, drop it off. She went down there, she dropped it off, but I was like, get the person's name, get who you left it with, just make sure that you have copies of whatever it is, get their contact information. But luckily, she got all of her stuff back. This was the one who messaged me. Was it today? Or was it? Yeah. It might have been today or yesterday. It might have been yesterday. Messaged me. Was like, I got all my phones back. Yeah, it was yesterday. Because she's like, I got all my phones back. Oh my God, I got all my phones back. So she was like, I'm going to send it in tomorrow on Monday. So just even going through that process, if you can go in person, get the people's name, find out the process, get your employer to cooperate if they can. But I'm telling y'all, these employers, they got to be on it, because I'm telling you, they getting pressure from the other end of the stick too, because they have to be cooperative in getting these forms signed, even though, people may be trying to get it in at the last minute, but they still got to get them signed and verified. Does forbearance for times when we have financial burdens count towards our 120? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I said, yes, it does. So it does, as long as your periods of forbearance were 12 months consecutive or more, or if they were 36 months or more cumulative, and also financial hardship forbearances will also count. So yes, it will. 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 Oh, yes, it will. I can't sing, but I had to hit a little harmony when I heard that. Sue says, my other son's loans are now with Advantage. That is right. That is right. So Navient, anyone who had Navient as their loan servicer for federal loan purposes, then their loans would have switched to Advantage. Their loan servicer would have moved to Advantage. Let me say that. I forgot my first year of teaching school in another state. Should I send in an additional application? Yeah, if you have a period of employment that you forgot to include, then I would just do one form for that period, so don't do anything that'll like override or overlap. So if you know that you had first year school that you were teaching in another state, as long as it was after, or as long as it was between October 1st, 2007 up until now, then you know that employment can count, because that's when PSLF kind of got stood up. But yeah, I would definitely do a form to cover that period if you know that you were in repayment status during that time, and if you know that you were if you know that you were in repayment status during that time, I would, to cover all bases. Will my loan in forbearance because of the pandemic possibly count towards the 120? Yes, they've indicated that forbearance periods will count, especially during the pandemic period, because we've been in a pandemic for over 2 years. So yes. Should we wait to start making payments until forbearance ends? So that's really up to you. That's up to you. And this goes back to essentially the volunteer payments. Because right now, your loans essentially should be set to zero, which means your interest rate should be zero, your required payments should be zero. So if you make voluntary payments during this time, it's not necessarily going to count like as an additional payment, because you're already going to get credit for the period anyway, because it was, we're under repayment pause. So it's really up to you if you want to. I mean, I don't see why, especially since they're saying that you can get your money back for the times that you paid voluntarily after, if you receive any kind of relief. So the one-time debt relief, again, is up to the extent of whatever is left. And then even for PSLF, you will get your money back if, like, let's say if you put in your applications now for PSLF, but it takes them some time to process, and by the time they get to processing it, we've already gone back into repayment status. So now you're making payments, and even during this voluntary period now, you could be making payments now if you want to make them voluntarily. You can get your voluntary payments back by reaching out to your loan servicer. So if you want to get your money back, you go to your loan servicer. But if you end up going into a repayment status at the beginning of the year, your PSLF forms hasn't been full, y'all, so I'm going to have to come off in a second. My phone is cutting off. But if you end up going to repayment status, you start paying on your loans by the 5th month or the 6th month in the new year, they process your application for PSLF. They end up discharging your balance. You can get refunded for any monies that you've paid up until the point where you reach the 120 and you were approved for the discharge. So they'll be giving you your money back for that. Then you can also get your money back for any voluntary payments that you made during the repayment pause, but you have to go through your loan servicer for that. And then when they process the one-time debt relief, if you've made any voluntary payments during that period, and if you have any monies left between what they apply to your relief in comparison to your loan, then you can get that back to the extent of what you paid in excess. You're wonderful. Oh, thank you so much, you guys. If you pay the FFEL loan, private loan off before January, can you still qualify for the one-time debt relief? If you pay your loan off, then there's nothing to forgive. So unless you have an FFEL private loan and you have other federal loans, then you can still apply for the relief now. But if you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, do you only have FFEL loans that are commercially held? Or do you have FFEL loans that are commercially held plus other loans like direct loan, parent loan, Perkins loan, whatever? So let me know that, because if you have both types, then you can still apply for the relief and get the relief for the loans that do qualify, which will be any direct loans that you have, Perkins loans, Parent Plus loan, loans in default. The one-time debt relief monies can work for those. It's just the FFEL loans that are commercially held, and if they weren't consolidated prior to that cutoff, then no relief money will be given for that. So you could still apply if you have other loans that are non-FFEL. Let me just say it that way. You could still apply if you have other federal loans that are not FFEL commercially held. Thank you so much. You've been very helpful. You're more than welcome. It's an honor. You're more than welcome. What happens if they deny my application? Then what do I do then? If they deny which one? Your PSLF? So if they deny your PSLF application, they'll tell you exactly why. So if you get denied, it could be that your employer wasn't eligible, or it could be that you didn't meet the 120 yet, or it could be that, those will really be the only two reasons. Really, those will really be the only two reasons. Either you don't have a qualified employer, or what was the thing I just said? Or you didn't reach 120 yet. Because under this limited, because I remember you, Mama, you put your stuff in during the limited waiver period. So you got your form signed, you got everything sent in. So if they give you a letter back and they deny you, they're going to tell you how close you are, or what was needed, or what's necessary. But I would still do the one-time debt relief application if you haven't done so already, to at least be able to get any relief on that end if you qualify. So for both. So do both. You don't have to choose one. You could do one-time debt relief and you could do PSLF. Do both. Same thing with borrower's defense. If you're trying to go the borrower's defense route, I would still put in my one-time debt relief application. I would still put them all in. Whichever process is first is what you will take. All right. If you are already with MOHELA, do you have to consolidate? So no, you don't have to consolidate. I think it just goes by the types of loans that you have. So you would have to look at your situation to see what would benefit you, if it would benefit you to consolidate now. So looking at your loans, looking at the repayment status for each of those loans, do you have any of those loans that would benefit under this limited waiver period, because they can be consolidated into a direct loan and you not lose any of the prior payments or the prior periods that you've accumulated on those other loan types? Then that would be the real reason why you would need to consolidate, so that you can get to public service loan forgiveness faster and under like one consolidated loan. So just look into that. I don't know what kind of loans you have, but definitely look into that. In order for the pandemic months to count, do I need to recertify my employment? I definitely would. And I don't know like how long ago you submitted a form before, but you definitely want to make sure that you were working with the qualified employer. If you want your pandemic months to count for PSLF purposes, then definitely make sure that you have a form on file for the periods, at least during the pandemic periods. Well, for however long you need to cover them, because if you put in a form already, you're saying that you need to recertify, so that means that you probably already been doing your PSLF forms. I would go back to cover at least from whenever was the last time I submitted a form up until now. I would do that, but you should still be in good shape because you already have one form on file. But I'll definitely get whatever additional forms I need to get in to cover my full employment periods. Can I consolidate after my PSLF application has been submitted, so the oldest date will be used? That's a good question. And the reason why I'm pausing is because they talked about the order. And I remember the Department of Education said first you need to decide if you need to consolidate, and you need to consolidate first. So you need to put your consolidation application in. Once you do that, then you can move forward with putting your forms in. But if you consolidate after your PSLF application, I think you should still be okay, because as long as you're doing it before the limited waiver period, I would think you would be fine. So if you need to consolidate, if you've already started submitting your forms, number one, you already have your forms in. So you could definitely, as long as you do the consolidation before the limited waiver, then I would think you will be okay. I would think you will be okay. Because if you just submitted your PSLF forms for everything, they're going to... I would probably try to do it as quickly as possible. Because remember, I was telling you guys about the order around when MOHELA gets your form, they're going to check to see if you have a pending loan consolidation. So they're going to check for that first. And if they see that you have a pending loan consolidation, they're going to hold your application until your loan consolidation processes, which will take 30 to 45 days or even more. Once your loan consolidation happens, then they're going to go to your form and start to verify your employment, verify your loan types, making sure that you're on the right loan plan and all of that. And then they'll start doing your counts. So, ooh, that's a good one. That's a good one. I have multiple direct loans, and this is one FFEL loan. So yeah, so if you have multiple direct loans, then just know your relief money is going to go to your direct loans. So you don't have to worry about trying to pay off your privately held loans or your commercially held loans in order to receive the relief, because that's not going to be the case for you because you already have loans that do qualify. So if you have direct loans already, then you can apply for the relief, and whatever relief you will receive will apply to those direct loans, just not your commercially held FFEL loans. And I'm going to try to get off here because I don't want my phone to hang up because my charger is nowhere near me right now. My charger is nowhere near me right now. And I don't want it to cut off because I at least want to be able to hold the, at least be able to upload this to my YouTube channel. Is there anything to support Parent Plus loans? We've talked about that a little bit. Parent Plus loans, definitely one-time debt relief will be the first thing that I would say. The second thing that I would say is if you have loans of your own and you work for a qualified employer, then you might want to consider the PSLF, which what we've been talking about. But understanding that if you have Parent Plus loans and you've been making payments on your Parent Plus loans, when you consolidate those loans, those periods won't roll over for you. So essentially, you'll be starting from zero if you work for a qualified employer. But I have some videos on my YouTube channel, and I have a playlist right here on my page here that speaks to Parent Plus loans and some of the options and things that people need to consider if they have Parent Plus loans. Deadline for the limited waiver for PSLF is October 31st, 2022, but you can still apply for PSLF even after that. It's just that the restrictions will go back into play. It'll go back under the normal PSLF rules if you end up applying after October 31st. CLW says, right, I've applied for PSLF, bars, defense, and the debt relief. Come on now, that's what I'm talking about. I haven't made any qualifying payments, but should I have been paying during the federal hold? No, you shouldn't. I don't think you should have, because you should be fine. Because your required payment was 0. All right, I'm so thankful for you. I submitted my forms earlier this week. Come on, Shelby. I'm celebrating you. She said, thank you for your help. You're so welcome. You're so welcome. CLW says, I didn't consolidate because I had the right loan types. Yeah, so if you have the right loan types, you're fine. But so I think you're thinking, should you consolidate now because you have multiple loan types, even though they are all direct loans, but they have different repayment periods. Because if you have multiple periods, like I explained, they're going to have different forgiveness dates because each one will have to reach 120 before it'll drop off. Thanks. That's what I was telling someone. Okay. Forms are processed, waiting on transfer. So the forms are processed and you wait on the transfer. Oh man, I hate to tell you to try to call Mohealy because I know people are like, I don't want to call them, been on hold for 2 hours. But if they're transferring them, you might still be able to consolidate. I think I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. So my recommendation would be to reach out to the loan servicer. That's what I would do. I have 7 direct Parent Plus loans, so must submit consolidation paperwork on Monday, correct? So let me answer this before we go. If you have 7 direct Parent Plus loans and these are the only loans that you have. If you decide to consolidate for public service loan forgiveness purposes, and Parent Plus loans are the only loans that you have, you need to bear in mind that when you consolidate, your loan count is going to start at 0. So you would have to work your way to 120 qualified payments at the time that you begin making payments on this new consolidated loan. Because Parent Plus loans as is will not roll over and count as qualifying payments after consolidation. Not even before consolidation, because Parent Plus loans as is it won't count because it has to be on a specific repayment plan. So if you have other direct loans, meaning non-Parent Plus loans, meaning direct loans that you have for you as the borrower when you went to school, then that will be the only advantage of consolidating all of them together, meaning the existing ones that you have plus your Parent Plus loans into one consolidation loan, but making sure that you pay attention to the counts, because when did your original loans go into repayment status? Not the Parent Plus ones, but the original ones that you have. When did they go into repayment status? Were you making payments on those? Trying to figure that piece out, because that's going to make or break your decision. Because what you don't want to do is think that I'm telling you to consolidate, which I'm not. That's why I'm saying you have to look at your situation to see if it makes sense for you to do that. Because if you only consolidate Parent Plus loans, your count is going to be starting from 0, and you will have to work your way to 120 qualified payments under this now new direct consolidation loan that is now going to be required to be on an income contingent repayment plan, which is the least favorable payment plan because of the requirements and how the monthly payments are calculated. And if you have 7 direct loans, then that more than likely means that that's going to be a lot of money. If you have 7 direct Parent Plus loans, then more than likely that's a lot of money. So look at that in the aggregate before you jump and consolidate, because once you consolidate and they process it, you cannot undo it. You might be able to catch them if you submit the application before it gets processed, but once that loan consolidation happens, that's it. Once that new old loan get paid off and that new consolidation loan is there, then that is it. AES told me not to consolidate for the relief, right? Because AES is commercially held, FFEL more than likely. So that's probably why they told you that you couldn't consolidate for the relief, because they cut that off September 29th. Thank you so much. You're so welcome. You're so welcome. I just got in. Oh, crap. It rolled down. Okay, you guys, we're going to go live again tomorrow. I really don't want my phone to cut off, so we're going to go live again tomorrow. Please feel free to continue to bring your questions. Make sure that you invite other people to come into the room tomorrow. We're going to do, I know I was a little late getting on today. I started half an hour after my intended time, but tomorrow we're going to do 8 p.m., so we'll be back 8 p.m. Please, please, please feel free to share this. Let people know when we're going to be going live again. If you guys have more questions, tag it as a Q&A question for me so that way I can answer it. I need to get back to the rest of the folks who asked me Q&A questions. I have it ready. I just need to post it. Can they give me some of the money I pay back? I think I just talked about that. Just got in. If we can't get it signed, will we submit? Oh, if you can't get it signed, in time, man, that's going to be a challenge if you can't get it signed in time. Because you don't want to say that your employer refused to sign because technically they didn't. You just didn't give them enough time to sign because you didn't get it to them in time. So you don't want to, check that box to say, oh, my employer refused to sign, because that really isn't the case. It's just that you didn't give them enough time to sign, depending on how long it took them to get it in or how long you sent it to them for them to sign off. But just try your best to get it in. And if you can't get them to sign, just provide alternative support if you just want to get it in with the deadline. If you want to get it in by the deadline. I love to call. LOL. CLW. Said I love to call. When you consolidate, does the end of the earlier loan apply to the other loans? I think I just explained that. Depends on what kind of loans you're consolidating. So I did just explain that. All right. Can I get money back after I paid them? Yes. So if you made payments during the repayment pause, those were considered voluntary payments. So if you want to get your money back, you can reach out to your loan servicer and work with your loan servicer to get those funds. The thing is, if you consolidate it or once that loan has been paid off through a consolidation, you may have challenges going back and getting your monies refunded because the loan has been satisfied. So I'm not sure where you are in that particular instance, but if you've been paying during the repayment pause, those will be considered voluntary payments because your payment requirement would have been zero during this time, and it still should be zero during this time. So if you want to get your money back, you can reach out to your loan servicer. For the one-time debt relief, and I'll explain this before we drop off, I'll explain this. For the one-time debt relief, if you have been making voluntary payments during this repayment pause period and your one-time debt relief gets processed, it gets applied, and if you have any monies remaining because your balance is less than the relief money that you were eligible for, if you made payments during that time, then you could get up to the extent of whatever is left in the excess between the amount of relief that you were eligible to receive versus what they actually applied to your remaining loan balances. You can get refunded for that difference to the extent of whatever it was that you paid, to the extent of whatever the leftover monies is. Same thing for PSLF. If you get approved for PSLF and they realize by, let's say, by October of this year, you've reached 120, but you have been making voluntary payments for whatever reason. You've been making voluntary payments even after the fact up until they process it. Any monies that you paid at the point your loans reach 120, you can get your money back for that. You will get your money back for that. So, and I'm assuming I can do ICR for, say, 30 years to make payments lower for 10 years. So with ICR doesn't give you... ICR is sticky because your payments are going to be based on your discretionary income, 20% of your discretionary income, or what you would repay on a 12-year plan. So that's how they determine what your payments will be. And I don't think it really gives you your loan term or loan length at that point. Dissenter is here. Hi, Dissenter. So good to see you. We get ready to close out. Welcome on into this room. So glad to see you, Dissenter. Dissenter. No way before this I paid them back in 2015. Oh, if you paid them back in 2015, then I don't think you'll be able to get anything back for that. I don't think. Thanks so much for your help. Got my application in on yesterday. Come on. Is there an application to complete to get your money back? You'll have to talk to your loan servicer. That's what I would do if you have questions around that. All right. You understand all of this so well. You're appreciated. It can be confusing. Thank you so much, MW. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I consolidated and paid $36,000 for mine and my daughter's loans. I need some of my money back. If you consolidated and paid $36,000 for yours, yeah, you might want to reach out to your loan servicer. But again, if you've already paid it off, you may have some challenges getting that back. But it doesn't hurt to try and check it out. Thank you. I needed to hear about Parent Plus loans. I'm glad I can help you guys. Glad I can help you all. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close out for tonight. Can ineligible payments count towards the 120? No. So if it's an ineligible payment, then that means you might have made a payment on an incorrect repayment plan. It could have been you made a payment that was not for the full amount. I mean, it could convert later on, like once they start applying all of these true ups, but they should be able to tell you the reason for the ineligible payments and how you can clear that. So I would definitely check in on that, depending on how many ineligible payments you have. You are a blessing to many of us who need your knowledge. Amen. Thank you, Sandy. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. All right, y'all. In order to preserve this live, I need to shut this down because I don't want my phone to cut off. And then I'm not going to be able to download it and put it on my YouTube. So you guys will be back tomorrow, 8 p.m. Bring your questions if you have more. Work through what you can work through based on the notes that you took today. And then come back tomorrow if you have more questions, because Monday, you got to get your stuff in. On Monday, we cannot be playing. It's the deadline. That's it. Okay? So remember, your financial prosperity awaits you, and so does your financial sanity. You already know what I'm going to tell you to do. And that's what? Get to work. See you on my YouTube channel, the Debt Demolisher TV. Check the link in the bio. Bye, guys. See you tomorrow at 8.